make sure that we are compensating the classified staff so that they want to work here and they want to be here. And I also believe that we need to be providing enough education and support for teachers so that they understand what the federally protected rights are and how they go about making sure that children's rights are protected. I'm not certain that the district has provided that type of support structure for all of the federal statutes and regulations that are applicable, including Title VI, Title I, McKinney-Vento, and so I think that we need to be providing that. Thanks.
Our district special education program has got to be funded. We have got to look at how these dollars are being allocated. The special education department, it was a step in the right direction to give our paras a raise, give the classified staff a raise. But it is more than that. It needs time and it needs attention. We have got to have a curriculum. The special education department has been without a curriculum for years, 10 plus years. That population of students needs assistance. We've got to have consistency. We've got to have dollars go towards that. We've got to have, at the administrative level, there's a diversity and inclusion committee that has started at East. The inclusive part of this is it should include all kids, special education. This needs to be in an administrative level. It needs to be part of our district's administrative team where we're looking at this. It's not just an aside. It is an overarching program that encompasses the whole district to assist those students.
The next question will begin with Craig Denny. Just another reminder, if you have a question that you would like to write down, go ahead and do that. We'll ask two more predetermined questions up here, and then we'll move on to the portion that is generated by you. So if you have a question that you haven't asked yet, go ahead and write one down, and a member of the Shawnee Mission Area Council will come around and pick it up. Or Miles will come pick it up. All right. Craig Denny, we'll begin with you on this next question. There has been talk that the district is top-heavy and that if we were leaner, that money could go into additional raises for teachers. How would you change the situation or the dialogue surrounding this topic?
It's a criticism I hear, and mostly I hear it from folks who I think don't clearly understand our structure. We reorganized several years ago and eliminated positions, expanded responsibilities, and so essentially flattened our administrative structure in a way that saved the district $1 million in payroll costs. That's something that the folks don't seem to ask a question about. I think Dr. Henson and now Dr. Southwick have done a pretty good job of recruiting talented people who have multiple responsibilities and are doing more as individuals that took 2 or 3 people to do in the system that preceded it.
I believe that there is a mismatch or a missed opportunity for communication around this issue. I respect that there have been some changes made, but the way that they're translated and being perceived by our teachers and experienced by our teachers in the classroom is different from what we what's been shared in the past from the school board. And so I believe there are a couple of things that we need to consider moving forward. One, I would like to see a more comprehensive conversation about the budget. We have a $300 million budget in Shawnee Mission, and I believe there were 2 questions asked in the board meeting to approve that budget. And I believe that there should be a more thorough conversation, a more comprehensive profile of how our dollars are being used and shared with the community so that our community is informed about how our dollars are being allocated in relation to administration and to teachers and classified staff. So I believe there's some unanswered questions in that gap. And if we are going to think about utilizing our resources well, I think we need to be responsive to our teachers who would like to see some of that administrative staff in the building more frequently and more accessible. I think the change from having resource staff and district curriculum coordinators has been one of the most common threads that I've heard in terms of a resource for our teachers. And if we're going to allocate those dollars to our administrative staff, they need to be done in a way that is supportive of what's happening in the classroom. Thank you.
All I know is what I read in the paper or the Shawnee Mission Post. And I believe I saw something that the budget for central office had nearly doubled during Dr. Henson's tenure. That might not be right, I'm just what I remember. But it would behoove us to streamline, so you don't have quite so many people in this beautiful new building. I would hate to leave, rooms open here, but so that those funds could go back to reduce class size.
I think I read the same article. And it's, my experience has been in talking to patrons and talking to educators is that we all know that you get what you pay for and everyone's willing to pay for quality, but there needs to be a shared burden across the board so that the district feels as though they're a team. And the burden with regards to the funding cuts has been overwhelmingly borne by the educators, and folks do not feel as though administration shared in that particularly negative experience. I think this is characterized by the controversy over the raise that Dr. Southwick got recently. Is $34,000 a make it or break it for the district? Probably not. But what is the appearance of that? How does that make people feel in the district when educators hadn't had a raise in a significant amount of time, and an administrator is receiving a raise, which really for some of our classified employees is the equivalent of an entire year's salary? How does that make the people on the ground feel? And so, I think we really need to work on making sure that there is, a genuine all hands on deck, that everybody's contributing when there's a burden equally, and when there isn't a burden, when there's an opportunity for, shared prosperity, that is also distributed equally amongst everybody in the district.
This is an excellent opportunity for a finance committee to look at this. I think, our district doesn't have a finance committee. We have one of the largest districts one of the largest budgets in the area, but we don't have a finance committee. Other districts do. So I think this is really difficult to answer because you don't know how these funds, how it's broken down. I mean, we know that salaries take up probably about 80% of our budget, but how is it broken down? What portion of that is actually administrative in this building? My understanding is that maybe principals have been put into that too. So I think we really need to sit down and dial into the numbers. We need to look at the budget, look at how the dollars are allocated, look at how these salaries are categorized, and then make a decision. Because yes, from the outset, it does look like it's top heavy compared to 10 years ago. But I think we need a little bit more information to figure that out exactly.
Some of the comments I heard from teachers is that we added all of these administrative positions, and yet classroom teachers said they still didn't have a clear sense of who they could pick up the phone and call if they had a specific question about something happening in their classroom. One music teacher said, I don't know who to call to get a bus to bring my choir to this music festival. And I know we have all these administrators, and so I have to assume that there was an administrator who could have helped with that problem, but this classroom teacher, this experienced classroom teacher, didn't know who that person was. And so if we have added all these positions, but it's not clear to the teachers what these administrators are doing to support them and help them in the classroom, then that is a real problem, especially when the teachers are aware of the salaries that these administrators are making. And I think that is the big problem, is that if we are getting a great value with these administrators, then we should be able to communicate that, and the teachers should understand that this person is making more money, but is adding value in the classroom for me. And I don't hear teachers feeling that way about these administrators. So I'm hoping that the new superintendent that comes in is going to take a look at our staffing structure and say, these things are great, we're going to keep them, but here's some places we might need to make some changes.
This will be the final question of the predetermined question part of this format. We'll start with Mary Sinclair. Please discuss how you will work to engage stakeholders with the board, such as parents, patrons, students, teachers, staff, local businesses, and community groups.
I would begin, I believe there's a number of strategies that we can use to better engage the community. I believe that's been as one of the top issues that I've heard in talking with parents and patrons throughout not only the campaign process, but in the last several years, that there's this disconnect between conversations and questions in the community and what's happening at the board and the district level. And so one of those strategies of engaging in a more meaningful way, I believe, is restoring the community advisory committees or some structure of that format. And I'd like to thank our board member Brett Stratton for introducing that proposal at the board meeting last night. So I would support a process like that. I would also like to see a continuation of district administrators getting out into the building. I believe that was something that was reinstated just recently, that there's an expectation for our district administrators to spend a specific amount of time in the schools on a monthly basis. So I would like to see that continued. I think there's also a number of other opportunities in which there are for meaningful engagement with the new state standards, looking at our site councils as a source of communication as part of the requirements for the accreditation. So I'd like to see the PTAs and the site councils as another way of rolling out information from our community level, from our building level, to maybe our advisory councils in our community, and those being two other very critical sources of conversation that bring people across the spectrum together, providing information to the district and the board and the superintendent. Thank you.
I've already made it clear how I stand on advisory boards, so that would be one thing. But there's one other thing that I would really, really encourage that Shawnee Mission get behind, and that would be to massively increase our digital footprint, redo that website, totally scrap it, and make it much more interactive, and set up group chats, and yes, I know we have a Facebook page, but really try to get everybody involved. And the one way that you can do that is digitally. And that would be one way to really enhance communication from everybody involved.
I'm going to echo appreciation for Brad Stratton's introduction of the community advisory panels last night. I think that is something that could be useful. I think we also want to make sure that we're grabbing people that might not be able to participate in such an event or a program. One of the things that Title I regulators recommend is wrapping around social services inside buildings, because you can reach people by pulling them in to get the social services. There are programs you can do that we are not doing right now, including supper programs, providing dinner in the evenings for families who are not able to, free and reduced lunch folks who might not be able to provide mealtime in the evening. We do have the JCPRD and the Y-Care in the afternoon. We could bring in supplementary services in the evening, and you can get people there when they're in the building. And when you pull the community into the building and you make it a community meeting spot, then you can engage folks that you might not otherwise be engaging. And I think that's really important. There are also lots of local organizations like El Centro, the NAACP, that can also be reached out to make sure that communicating with them and hearing what their concerns are, reaching out to business communities to see what they can do for schools that may not already have resources. I know at our school we reached out to some of the businesses in downtown Overland Park, and they helped provide Christmas meals for our families that weren't able to purchase Christmas meals, including gifts for the children. And so there's ways to engage folks and to bring them in. Thank you.
Have we all said advisory boards are a good idea. So the advisory boards, finance committee, those are ways that you engage your teachers and your parents and your community experts on different issues. I have also, when this process started, I have felt like the community needed an avenue of communication with the board and the administration. And I firmly believe that the board should provide that avenue of communication. You know, our patrons don't necessarily get that during the open forums, which is okay, because that's the way a governmental body runs. But if we could implement a town hall, if we can implement some type of setting where patrons can come and you can have discussions with board members, that's one way to engage our stakeholders. Another way is through community partnerships. Our community is awesome because we have got such a level of engagement with businesses. Our signature programs here is an excellent opportunity for community partnerships. And the opportunities abound. Like there was just an article about Shawnee Mission East. They couldn't go on a prairie field trip, but the Audubon Society, they sponsored that. And all it took was an ask, and that formed an excellent community partnership. So opportunities exist.
In addition to all of the things that have been mentioned here, great new things we can start, like advisory councils and task force and things like that, finance committees. We should highlight the things that are already happening that are engaging people in the community in our schools. The VIP program, or having mentors come into our schools, having guest speakers come in and speak to our classes, business people about what it is that they do as children, and older students especially, are thinking about careers. There are all sorts of ways that we can engage the business community in the actual education of the students. And beyond that, there's all sorts of ways that they support us through donations and being actively engaged in things that are going on in the schools. Many of us participated in the West is Best Scholarship, what was it, Viking Palooza Day. And it was great fun, and all sorts of people from the community donated things, and parents came with their kids, and it was all free, and it was a great time for the kids to get to have fun. And there was also donation of clothing that older students had outgrown, and so the kids could come pick up Viking clothing and sporting equipment and things like that. It was just a wonderful community time, and businesses were involved, churches were involved, candidates were involved, and I think we can expand on things like that.
Well, insofar as engagement goes, every board member has a district telephone that goes to voicemail and a district email. And so patrons can communicate with us at any time. We also do school visits, so we'll see what's going on in the school. I think advisory boards are they're an interesting tool. We had them for years. I chaired the West Advisory Board until about 2004. In some of our last meetings, the only people that were there were the administrators from the school and the two PTA ladies who brought juice and cookies. Now, I don't say that parents weren't interested, but at that point in time, we'd have meeting after meeting where we just look at ourselves, and so we gave the administrators a night back that they wouldn't have to come to a meeting. But I don't disagree that we need to communicate with our patrons, and I try and do that whenever I can.
All right, we'll move on to the portion of the form that is generated from questions by you. Just to be transparent about this, if you were at the one for the primaries, you might remember this. So I've received all your questions. I've tried to group them thematically around some of the same themes, so I might not get to your question, but hopefully there will be a question like it that will kind of touch upon some of the same topics you wanted to ask about. Also keeping in mind some of the topics that have already been addressed. I'm also going to try to get to some new topics as well. And I'm going to pull an audible, and I'm looking at Denise and Catherine to see if this is all right, just because we're a little bit over time. The original format was for 1.5 minutes for responses. Maybe cut that down to 1 minute just to get more questions in. So instead of 1.5 minutes, you'll have 1 minute to respond to these questions. We'll start with Jim Lockard, because that was where we were at in the order. And so these are questions from the audience. Several questions about for lack of a better term, board operations, board procedure. So we'll start with this two-part question. What is your opinion about open board meetings, and what is your opinion about parent-teacher input during board meetings?
I really would like to see us go back to 2 different board meetings a month, and one of them would be much more of an open, give and take, discuss with anybody that's there, kind of session, an open session. And then you have the traditional, get all the business done, get the reports, and so on and so forth. That would be my suggestion.
I absolutely agree with the 2 meetings a month. When Hinson came to the district 4.5 years ago, the district went from having 2 board meetings a month to 1 board meeting a month. And that's also when we saw an increased use of the consent agenda, most likely because you're trying to get done all of that work in a shorter amount of time. And then you also saw the limited opportunity, the time-limited opportunity to ask questions. If we increase the amount of time that the board is available, then you can increase the amount of time that parents have to engage and to ask questions. And while a board member might not always have an answer for the parent asking the question at that time, I do think that we need to be able to say, I will get that information and I'll get back to you. Because I know right now there's a lot of frustration for folks who come to meetings and they pose questions and then they don't feel like they're getting a response during the board meeting.
Will you repeat the question?
What is your opinion about open board meetings and your opinion about parents and teachers having input during board meetings?
I'm open. I mean, I think that parents and teachers, I think that they, like I said before, they need an avenue, they need a channel of communication. So I understand why the open forum during our current board meetings, it's not a discussion back and forth. City councils do the same thing, and I understand that format. But I do think that we need to evaluate giving patrons an opportunity to have a dialogue with the board and have that input.
I would personally be in favor of going to 2 meetings a month. I do think it gives more of a relaxed atmosphere. We don't feel like you would have to rush through so many things in one night. I think it would maybe open some more space for some conversation. I do think the public forum time should be looked at and see if there is a way to maybe have a more informal conversation. Maybe the board can't address the concerns the person is bringing right in that moment, but perhaps there's a time that they could schedule a face-to-face conversation or gather other interested people in that topic together to have a conversation about it. It just feels very stilted to not be able to respond to what a person is saying, especially if there's a lot of emotion behind what they're saying, and to not, for the rest of the room, to not know how that's resolved. And so I think we need to figure out better ways to do that.
I do think we've gotten a little better. Since I became president, we've done a little bit better job, I think, of trying to answer questions when we have the information at our fingertips. So I think we're getting better at that. Tell me again the rest of the question.
Open board meetings as well as your parent and teacher input during board meetings.
Yeah, I think that's why we have open forum. We want to hear from people. We can't always answer because we might not have the information at our fingertips, but we do want to hear from people. Our meetings are open, so I'm not sure what exactly that meant. And I'm fine with 2 meetings a month. I think we came back to, we were 2 meetings a month for years because we had to pay the bills. And when we did everything by hand, the business office could not get everything processed at once. And so they asked for 2 meetings. And so for years, that's what it was. I think as the efficiency moved, so we didn't have, it takes a while for staff to prepare for a board meeting. So I think more for efficiency, we went to 1 a month. If we'd like to go back to 2 under the next superintendent, I don't have a problem with
that. I share an agreement with most of the recommendations and suggestions that have been made to this point. I would maybe add to that a few other suggestions about what might be done even in just that interaction between the board and the protocol that's established if people people who come up during open forum. A couple of things maybe that could be considered would be having, when the cabinet is at the board meeting and they're sitting along the side here, maybe they can use that as an opportunity to dial into the website and to bring up information that already is existing that that concerned person and the other people in the room might be able to access. So we could make use of the screens that are here and the technology. So bringing up that information. Sharing a little bit about the process of where that information would be communicated. And one other piece is actually having the people who come up and speak maybe share their name and their school, high school area that they're living, but leave the information about their address to writing. I feel like that could be a little bit intimidating. So how we could just make it more responsive and comfortable. A couple ideas. Thank you.
The next question will begin, I think, down at the other end of the table with Heather Ousley. This is not an exact word-for-word question. This is my synthesis of several questions that were asked, being transparent about that. But there were several questions about the next superintendent. And so this question is, what qualifications are you looking for in the person who will be hired as the next superintendent?
So I think, to begin with, I want a different leadership style. I think our previous superintendent's leadership style was a little bit more autocratic, and I prefer a leadership style that was a little bit more democratic, making sure that they were involving everyone in the district, making sure they were listening to what the patrons wanted, and implementing the vision of the district, and maybe not necessarily the vision of that particular leader. I want it to be a shared community vision. I want to make sure that the next superintendent is responsive to the community, but also genuine, humble, and puts the needs of the students first, obviously, and one who values transparency and who values the educators in the district. I want to make sure that they know that the people on the front lines are the backbone of the district and that they're the most important, and so that they look at it from the perspective of someone who really appreciates those that are underneath them and not just those that are at the top.
The next superintendent, we need to look at their qualifications, we need to look at their credentials, but we also have to look beyond the resume. We have to look at how they have interacted with their staff, the administrators, and the teachers in the district. We have to know what type of environment they fostered. Have they been, are they a person that is out in the buildings with the community? Are they out there in, with the teachers? Do they have some political astuteness? I think that's important for here. And one of the most recent questions that's come up is, do we think that this person should have a PhD? You know, when this first came up, my initial reaction was, yes, I do think that that person should have a PhD. But then as I saw comments and I saw how people were evaluating it, and I sat through the board meeting and Brad Stratton, one of our board members, had made comments about, you know, we're trying to cast a wide net. And so I think the credentials are important, but we do have to look at the person and what they're bringing to the table.
Definitely, we want to look at the 2 E's of experience and education that this person has. This person has to be qualified, but there's also the 2 A's, which is attitude and aptitude. And I think those are the things I'm going to be at least as interested in. I want to know, is this someone who can adapt? Because as I said, we're a transitioning school district right now. We've got all these families that speak other languages. We've got a changing demographic. We need somebody who can adapt, who can see what's happening several years down the road and be able to make some changes now with a leadership style that gets everybody on board, that gets everybody to take ownership of what these changes are going to be and get excited about it. And those are the qualities I would be looking for in a new superintendent.
There will be 7 people who get to interview the next superintendent. I think all of these qualities have been mentioned and which will be mentioned are very important, but I think we want to see what the community profile tells us as well. We are hiring a superintendent for you and for our children your children, your grandchildren, my grandchildren. I have grandchildren that will graduate with the classes of 2023 to 2035. So I'm concerned about the future.
A number of characteristics, strengths, experiences have been identified to me in conversations with teachers and parents and community members throughout the campaign process and over the last several years that I've been involved in working through the PTA and advocating for our public schools. Those include things like we need a superintendent who is an inspiring instructional leader, who has a collaborative shared management style, who has experience with one-to-one technology, who is culturally competent. So I share in a lot of the characteristics that were identified here. The other piece I would add to that is that I believe that there is a responsibility of the board to establish a vision for our district. That comes from the board and from a process of engaging and getting feedback from the community and establishing that vision. I agree with the idea of setting up a structure of the community advisory boards, getting those in place before we have a new superintendent that sets the tone that we are an engaged community and here is our process for meaningful engagement. So I look for a shared relationship that's a little bit different balance between the board and the superintendent as well, I think is important in the search process.
Ideally, we will find a candidate that has a proven track record for improving the climate and the relationships and the inclusivity in their school district, whether as an assistant superintendent or as a superintendent, maybe a superintendent of a smaller district, but somebody with a proven track record that knows where they want to go, knows how to get everybody on board.
This next question will begin with Mandi Hunter. This question was a singleton, but it's something that has not been addressed in this form yet, and I don't think was actually addressed in the primaries either. There have been numerous buildings at the elementary level that have been rebuilt. This is our 13th year, this is whoever wrote this question speaking, this is our 13th year at our elementary school. There's been little done to make that building better. Numerous parents are concerned about air quality at the school. How are you going to make sure all children are in healthy environments in the district?
The Shawnee mission is unique. Because we are the heart of the district, we are the oldest district in the county. We are, and with that comes excellent community engagement, and with that also comes the need for some updates to our infrastructure. As a credit to Brad Stratton, in this discussion through about advisory boards, this is a reason that we need a facilities committee. Our district has to have people that are evaluating this and are looking at this. Our buildings, we've got dollars that have to go towards the update of infrastructure, but we also have to have, but we've got to ensure the health and quality of our kids in those older buildings.
If there is a genuine health concern with one of our schools, I would just assume that that has been brought to the board's attention, has been brought to the superintendent's attention, that people are going in there and testing air quality, testing water quality, whatever the concerns are. As someone who's been a parent in this district, as a community member, I would demand that. We have to expect that. That being said, if we find that these older schools are safe, but they're just older schools and they just don't function well anymore, then I think we need to have a time frame, have a plan. When are we going to get around to updating these schools? I got to tour the 7 elementary schools in the West area, and Pawnee has not been updated, and it's really noticeable when you go see all the other schools and all the wonderful new things they have, and then you go to Pawnee. It's as old as I am, and that's pretty darn old. So we need to be able to say, okay, you're next on the list, and this is the year it's going to happen, and here's the changes we're going to make so that those families know that they're not being ignored or forgotten.
We have a pretty responsible O&M staff, and Bob Robinson runs that whole department, and he assesses all our school buildings. And so I would tell you that we don't have an air quality problem anywhere. We do have older buildings. We inherited a lot of older buildings when we unified in 1967 or 8. And we are replacing them. That's a responsibility. We had a no mill increase bond levy several years ago, passed by 80% of the voters. We are looking at what we do next, and we are looking at Pawnee, for example. It's probably the next one, but we have in the last 4 years built 6 elementary schools. Lenexa Hills is under construction now, but we celebrated Benninghoven, we celebrated Trailwood and Briarwood, and so there's a plan, and we're working on it.
Kyle, could you repeat the question again?
Yeah, the question itself is how are you going to make sure all children are in healthy environments in the district?
What I would like to add, I think, to this conversation then is maybe there's an opportunity here for dissemination of a plan on how our buildings, what's the status of our buildings, who's next in line for renovations and improvements. I know that the district has dollars allocated for continuous maintenance and projects and updates, but to what extent is that being prioritized for the buildings across our district? And so to the extent that we can see that strategic plan, where we are in the process, what's the status and the update of what's coming next, that also serves as a way to inform the community if we have additional bond projects coming up of where and how we would need additional dollars to bring our buildings up to the level of quality that we would expect for all of our students. So I believe we just need a little bit more information and dissemination of the planning processes in place and engaging the community in ways to improve that. Thank you.
Give credit where it's due. We had a building or a classroom health quality complaint a couple of years ago at Shawnee Mission East, and the new team at O&M got people from Children's Mercy. They came over, they did the research. The researcher, that with all of his equipment, was a former student. That was pretty darn cool. And they came back later with a 30-page report, and the classroom was just fine, by the way. So the district is responsive. On the old building thing, folks, we're rebuilding elementary schools, but I haven't seen any kind of long-range plans for those secondary schools, which are a much harder nut to crack, a much bigger issue. There are a lot of ideas out there, but, well, now's not the time to talk about them, so we'll stop there.
And then Heather Ousley will win this one.
I'm going to echo the need for a stronger communication between the district and the patrons so that we know what the plans are, we know what's coming up next, we know, if we're not on the plan, who we need to talk to advocate to get it done. With some of the older buildings, we absolutely need to stay on top of those things. I know at my kiddos' elementary school, they updated the paint outside, and our building is quite old, and there were paint chips all over the ground. And I became immediately concerned that there might be lead paint in the chips because my husband's a painter, and we called the district and they sent guys out right away. They vacuumed everything up, they tested it, and everything was fine. So the district was responsive when it came to the health and safety of the kids at the building level. And I believe that the district would continue to be responsive. If for some reason there's an issue that we're not aware of or that the district isn't aware of, we need to make sure that there's a communication plan in place so that people can make sure that it gets taken care of.
This next question will start with Laura Guy. We're getting towards the end of this section, so this question was a nice kind of summative question, or a good one to kind of end on. If you could make just one change to the district, what would it be? And this is this question, asker, your election does not count. If you could make just one change to the district, what would it be?
I think I would put a cap on class sizes so that we were guaranteed that no class in this district would have more students than a teacher could reasonably educate well. And that would take more money. I'm assuming this is a magic wand thing, and you can get all the resources you need to make this one change. But that would be the magical one change I would make. We would have all the resources so we could cap all of the classroom sizes, so that the teachers had a chance to breathe and be their best. Teachers want to succeed. They want to be the best possible teachers they can be, and it's just frustrating when there are so many limitations put on what they're able to do. And so to free them up to be able to teach a reasonable number of students, I think we would see the quality of education in this district continue to go even higher than it already is.
You picked a good one. I would want to provide free breakfast and lunch for every student.
I would like to see the restoration of appropriate planning and collaboration time for our teachers, particularly at the secondary level. A couple of years ago, our secondary teachers were asked to pick up an additional class and to let go of their collaborative time, their supervisory time that was commitment to the building. And so they have less time to individualize instruction, to be responsive to students, to be responsive to parents, and to collaborate with their teachers and colleagues in the building. And in addition, they were given more students taking on an additional class. So if we want to see that level of excellence, we want to see that integration of technology and of improvements in mathematics instruction and embracing the new New York Engage curriculum, those kinds of things that we need to provide our teachers with the opportunity to, and the professional, and continue to support the professional development so that they can be responsive to our needs of our students. Thank you.
I'm not going to cap class size, but I am going to cap workload, because that's really where the most important time factor comes into play. You've got to have a small enough number of students, and therefore a small enough number of parents, that you can actually communicate with them. All right? I can teach a class of 35, but I can't teach 6 classes of 35. Let me give you the numbers in the English department. Used to be, 10 years ago, it was 25 class was the class limit, and you had 5 classes. All right? Now, we have English teachers teaching 170 students. Okay? That just can't go.
I'm going to work off the assumption that the magic wand is working and that all of these things were already addressed, so I get to pick a new one. I think I would like to go back to purchasing a math curriculum, actually. Everything I've heard with regards to Engage New York has been not what I think is up to what I believe our district standards are. I think we need to be purchasing high-quality curriculum to make sure that all of the kiddos in the district are getting their needs met. Some of the things I've heard with Engage New York is that teachers are really having to do a lot of heavy lifting with regards to printing off materials and supplementing, because the information isn't presented in a manner that is consecutive and grows upon the previous lesson. As a kiddo who really loves math, or as I have a kiddo who really loves math, it disappoints me that we're not spending money to make sure we have a high-quality curriculum as opposed to using an open-source curriculum that's New York's Common Core.
There are so many things that we could do with the magic wand. Class sizes, curriculum. I think